Well, hello for the first time, or hello again. I'm Rob, this is Randy. Last year, during the beginning of the lockdown, we spent some time doing what we called gospel reflections with Bible studies and community groups not meeting. Randy and I just took the time to sit down and share with each other and with you all what we were seeing God teach us in His Word that week. And a lot of you gave us very positive feedback. You found that just a very encouraging and insightful, or I don't know if anybody ever used the word insightful.
It's presumptuous,
Yeah,
but
yeah, okay, we'll say encouraging
There you go.
time. There we go. And just looking at the summer and seeing how, though we might not be in the same circumstances as last summer, we are in a situation where a lot of Bible studies and community groups aren't meeting, a lot of people are traveling, but we still want to be connected and centered around God's Word. And so we thought maybe even just for the summer, we'd resume some of the gospel reflection time. And so I'm going to kick us off looking at what I've been in this week has been Judges, the book of Judges. And, when I was growing up, when I'm talking like 9, 10, 11 years old, younger kid, anytime someone would ask me what my favorite Bible story was or my favorite Bible character, I would say Gideon.
nice.
Okay, and you have to get into my mentality, being the kind of person I was and wanting to impress people with how much I knew.
You didn't want to use a typical.
I didn't want to pick somebody that everybody knew. When you say Gideon, people know, oh, this okay.
You're serious.
Yeah. So Gideon was always my favorite, partly because it was just a really cool story that I didn't feel like I really heard that much about. You've got the whole, setting up the story, you've got the whole story of Gideon being called by God and him saying, look, I am the least, I can't do this. It echoes what happened with Moses as well. Moses feeling like he was unworthy to lead God's people. We later learned, scared to do it. The same was true of Gideon. He was so scared, he kept asking God for these tests.
Yeah.
And God very graciously responded by showing Gideon what he needed to see in order to have the courage to do what God had called him to do. And then we get to this point where God is calling Gideon to go against the armies that oppose God's people, the Midianites. And in Judges chapter 7, I like this part, beginning in verse 2, where the Lord says to Gideon, "The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me." So then he tells them to send home anyone who's scared. And suddenly his army goes from over 30,000 down to 10,000, which not a lot in the context of warfare in any age. But if we were to look back a few chapters earlier in one of the previous military victories with Barak under the prophetess Deborah, he had 10,000 men. So maybe Gideon's thinking, I still got 10,000. That's enough to defeat an army. That Barak did it. We can do it. But then in verse 4, and the Lord said to Gideon, "The people are still too many." And he gives him this weird kind of instruction, a test to weed out until it's down to 300 men. 300 people going into an army against the Midianites. And if you know the story, you know that the 300 is more than enough because they never really even experience hand-to-hand combat. The Lord turns the Midianites against each other in fear as Gideon and his men surprise attack. And so it's actually the Lord who wins the battle. And that's kind of the point. And that's why the Lord says twice, you've got too many guys. And I always like reflecting on that idea of the Lord saying, yeah, you've got a lot of men, but it's too many to win this battle. What general has ever looked at his army and said, I've got too many men to win this battle?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you need more, not less?
Every war movie I've seen, even fantasy like Lord of the Rings, it's always we need more, and then this great army of more men comes to the rescue. So yeah, I've never really heard send some of these guys home.
Yeah, there are too many for us to win victory. And so as I reflect on that, I've just been mindful of how the Lord wants us to embrace our weakness and to seek being. Here's where the analogy fails, because in the case of Gideon, he's calling Gideon and the Israelites to become weaker. And I think what happens in the gospel is the Lord calls us to recognize and dwell within our weakness.
Our inherent weakness.
Yes, the weakness that's already there. And at times that needs to be exposed. It got me thinking about the disciples and just with some of the Bible stories I've been reading with my kids lately. And Peter and how he failed. He denied Jesus and ultimately needed to be restored. I was reading another author, Dallas Willard, who said, the Lord knew Peter was going to do that. And rather than try to fix Peter and keep it from happening, he knew that Peter needed to experience that and be restored in order to be the kind of man who had experienced grace and operated with a mindset of grace and who was aware enough of his weakness to faithfully minister the gospel. And so I've just been thinking about how the Lord allows us not only to be weak, but to be exposed to our weakness, to experience things that make us feel weak, because at times he's saying, you've got too much. You feel like you've got too much.
Yeah, and one of the things that I thought when you brought this idea up of doing Gideon is I thought sin right away. I thought weakness equals sin. And while that's not wrong, it's not complete, I guess, because weakness can include things that are not sin. One of my I paid thousands of dollars to go to seminary, and we laugh that one of the most impactful things we came out of it with was a professor went to the board, he wrote a straight horizontal line down the middle, and he said everything can be categorized into two things: God. Can you finish
Not
it?
God,
Not God. I think every seminary had a professor like this, right? God and not God. And so the fact that we are not God is in itself a sort of weakness. We don't have all the knowledge, and that's not a result of sin. We don't have all the power, and that's not a result of sin. And because we live in a broken world, there are aspects of sin that are not guilt. So I'm reminded of Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where, this thorn in the flesh, he writes that 3 times in verse 8, I pleaded with the Lord that he should take away this thorn, that it should leave me. But his response was not repent. The Lord's response was not, how dare you? The Lord's response was, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. Not necessarily in sin, but in your weakness, in you coming to me. Yeah.
I like how Paul goes on there. The application, therefore, I'm going to boast all the more eagerly of my weakness, of the things that show my insufficiency.
So that the power of Christ may rest in me. It's the paradox of Christianity. I will become weak to gain power.
Now, how do we struggle with that? How do we, and I'm specifically thinking in modern American Christianity, how do we fail to live out that idea of God's power being made perfect in our weakness? How do we avoid being weak?
Yeah, well, I think that's how we resist it. We try to avoid it. So number one, I think everything from the time we are young children is about power. It's about, and power manifests itself in different ways. It's, if you're in sports, you're trying to get stronger. If you're in school, you're trying to get more knowledgeable, more capable,
or more popular, or
yeah, you're trying to become more independent. That's what your parents are teaching you, right? To become independent, and everything is more power, more status, more greatness, and the call of the gospel is almost contrary to that.
And I think a lot of people would embrace this idea of our weakness up to the point of salvation.
Sure.
Once I receive Christ, then there's this idea of the power of God at work in us, and so suddenly, I think some of us feel compelled to maintain an illusion of being powerful and not having weakness because, Christ takes away my weakness. The gospel removes weakness from me. But that's the opposite of what we see in Scripture.
Yeah, since I'm sitting right in front of Galatians, I nowhere in the fruit of the Spirit do I see power. And I wonder if we add that. I wonder if, you know, when we're listing the fruit of the Spirit, we unintentionally add have my life together,
Mm.
or power,
Yeah.
which is really what we mean by that.
Yeah, control over my circumstances, getting things right, financially secure, family the way I want it to be,
Yep.
friendships doing well, whatever, you name it. We have all these things, and it applies to even spiritual things as well. I'm not doubting. I'm being an effective witness. I know my theology, whatever it is, we can put any number of things in this category of what makes us feel, or what we believe makes us appear strong. And we're commanded to instead lean into our weakness, which I think you're looking ahead somewhere else, but my thought, my question is, and maybe we can deal with it another time, is where's the balance though? I mean,
Yeah, well, there is a sense in which, you know, this is why it's a paradox. Being a strong, powerful Christian means being weak.
yeah.
I mean, so it's exactly where I was
Okay.
going. One mind here. Hebrews, right? Jesus, the most powerful being in all of the universe, took on weakness. The author of Hebrews writes in chapter 4, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses," which is not to mean sin, by the
Mhm.
way. We're not necessarily talking about sin, because Jesus did not sin. But he was made in every respect, he was tempted as we are, yet without sin. So therefore, we can draw near to the throne of grace with confidence, so that we can receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And the author of Hebrews goes on to say how Jesus is better in every respect. He's better because he didn't have to offer the sacrifices. He's better because he's in a different line of priests. He's better. And so the paradox of Christianity is this, you know, in order to become wise, I have to forsake the wisdom of this world. In order to become strong, I have to forsake what the world calls strength. And again, we're not necessarily talking about sin. There's a sense in which we simply acknowledge that we are not God.
And then I think of in Timothy how Paul instructs Timothy that, in 2 Timothy, that the Lord has not given us a spirit of timidity or fear, but of power,
Right.
and love and self-discipline. And so again, there's this, like, how then what does power look like? And I think of in Colossians 2, or at the end of Colossians 1, verse 29, where Paul, in writing about his ministry, says, "For this I toil, struggling with all his energy that he powerfully works within me." And I think of the gospel being the power of God for salvation, this idea that, going back to Gideon, the Lord said, you've got too much, because if you have enough, if you are manifesting what the world perceives as strength, in this case, large army of large numbers, then you will be able to boast and say, it's by my own strength that I did this. And what he wants is for us to be accomplishing things, including sanctification, perseverance, ministry, whatever it is he's calling us to do. He wants us to do it according to his strength, doing things that we can only do empowered by the gospel.
And so I think the question becomes, where does the power come from?
Yes.
Not should we embrace this power, or if we have a powerful God, or all of these things. The question is, where does the power come from? And so we follow God's word in all the many ways that might look like. We begin to love our spouses well, and we see the fruit of that often becoming a strong marriage. But being weak as we are, we start to think, that's because I, and we forget that the Lord calls us to faithfulness and to work through his power.
We didn't set it up this way on purpose, but it just occurs to me that the sermon that I'm preparing for this Sunday, which if you're watching this shortly after it was filmed, we'll be looking at the healing of Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5. That'll be on, what's this Sunday? It's the 26th?
27th.
27th, June 27th. And one of the issues that Naaman is dealing with is the the message of the gospel to him, the message of salvation and healing, comes through a humble servant girl, a slave, and then he goes to this enemy kingdom, and he's not treated with the respect he thinks he deserves. And then when Elisha tells him how he's to be healed, he's offended by it. It's not a glamorous thing. It's not something that feeds into his perception and idea of what strength should be. And he almost misses the opportunity to be healed and delivered because he is not willing to set aside his false views of power and accept the weakness that God has called him to.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us. We hope you're encouraged by what God says to his people in his word. We hope this inspires you to continue on your own and in the company of God's people, being in his word together, being encouraged by the gospel, and letting his word build you up in every good